Donald Lee Baker was born on October 17th, 1947. He was white with brown hair, brown eyes, and estimated to have been 5'1" and 100 pounds. At the time that he went missing, he was 12 years old. He also went by the names of Don and Donnie. The last known items he was seen wearing were a white t-shirt, burgundy jacket with stripes on the sleeve, and blue jeans. He lived with his parents in the 5700 block of Rockdale Avenue in Azusa, California. Brenda Joe Howe was born on August 19th, 1947. She was white with brown hair, brown eyes, and estimated to have been 4'9" and 95 pounds. She was also 12 years old when she went missing. Brenda was last known wearing aqua pedal pushers, aka capris, a gray plaid jacket, a yellow metal watch, and a white metal ring. Brenda had lived in Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and was visiting her married sister that lived on the 5700 block of Rockdale Avenue in Azusa, California. The two children were last known to have been seen in the San Gabriel Canyon area near Glendora Mountain Road in California. It was reported that the two had grown close to each other and experienced puppy love. A few days later, Donald's jacket and Brenda's bike were found near Moore's Dam, which is a quarter-mile south of where they were last seen. Initially, authorities believed that the children had run away from home. In 1970, a man named Mack Ray Edwards pled guilty to killing 3 California children and was sentenced to death at his own request. He subsequently confessed to the murders of 3 other children, which were Donald, Brenda, and a person named Roger Madison. Edwards directed investigators to a site where he said that he disposed of their remains, but a search found nothing. He was never charged in connection to any other cases due to a lack of evidence. It should be noted, Donald Baker and Brenda Joe Howe were known to Edwards. Donald was Edwards' neighbor, and Brenda was his sister-in-law, aka he was married into Brenda's family. Edwards was employed as a heavy equipment operator in the 50s and 60s, having helped construct many of the highways in California. Born on October 17, 1918, in Arkansas, he moved to Los Angeles County in 1941. It was there where he was contracted to work for Caltrans. One source states that he had worked as a combat engineer in World War II, and his father was a policeman in Arkansas. There doesn't seem to be any information on his mother. In the 50s, he became a member of the International Union of Operating Engineers, Local 12. He lived in Sylmar, California, kept horses, and allowed neighborhood children to ride them. He took the local kids camping also. Allegedly, most people who met Edwards actually liked him. He didn't drink or cuss, and the father of the children that Edwards eventually kidnapped had stated that Edwards was a great guy. He killed 3 children from 1953 to 1956, and 3 more from 1968 to 1969. In 1970, he and a teenage male accomplice kidnapped 3 girls from their home in Sylmar. The girls escaped and Edwards surrendered to the police, confessing to molesting and murdering 6 children. Edwards admitted to kidnapping and murdering Donald Baker and Brenda Howell. He stated that he had paid Donald $7 to lure Brenda into the foothills, where he then drove the children deeper into the canyon. Once they arrived, he separated the children. Edwards beat Donald with a rock and slit his throat. This caused Brenda to approach them, and Edwards panicked and killed her. Once the children went missing from their families, one source states that Edwards played like he didn't know what was going on and tried to find the children. Another source states that at the canyon, Edwards walked Donald up a dirt road where he beat him with a rock until he was unconscious. As Donald started to wake up, Edwards cut his throat. He then told Brenda that Donald had been bitten by a rattlesnake and needed her help, which is when he killed her. After 3 bodies were recovered, Edwards pled guilty to 3 counts of murder and 3 charges of kidnapping. Despite claiming that he was guilty, initially the judge denied his plea, as a guilty plea would have made the possibility of giving him the death sentence impossible. Edwards' lawyer tried to plead for his life, and in the end, Mack Ray Edwards was sentenced to death. At the sentencing, he stated, "I want the chair. That's what I've always wanted. My lawyer told me there are 100 men waiting to die in the chair. I'm asking the judge if I can have the first man's place. He's sitting there sweating right now. I'm not sweating. I'm ready for it." In prison, he claimed to have killed several people and thought that no one would dig up the bodies under the freeway. In 1971, Mack Ray Edwards committed suicide while on death row. He died on October 30th, 1971, after having 2 unsuccessful attempts before, through the use of tranquilizers. No one knows how he got those tranquilizers. He hung himself eventually with a television cord in his cell in San Quentin State Prison. It is unknown where he was buried. Despite there being information that he had gotten married, it is next to impossible to find any information about this. There was only one source with information that states that Edwards was married on August 11th, 1946, to Mary Oliva Howell when he was 28 and she was 16. Multiple sources state that they adopted 2 children. Interestingly, Edwards was an avid reader of crime stories. In an interview with her posted on LA Weekly, she stated Edwards wrote a confessional letters to her being his widow, admitting to being the abductor to one of the children that had been missing. The letter also implicated an alleged crippled neighbor of Edwards's, stating that he took the rap for the neighbor and actually only killed 1 child. An investigator in the article stated, "He wasn't really a bad guy, but he confessed to the murder to help the paraplegic. There was no paraplegic that anybody knew of, and he never mentioned this person at his trial." One source states that some people believe the paraplegic could have been his accomplice, if they existed, or that one of his children could have been the accomplice that tried to help Edwards kidnap the children. Authorities also believed that he was responsible for the disappearances of Ramona Price and Karen Tompkins. His alleged victims range from 7 to 16 years old. Authorities believed that the person responsible for Ramona Price's disappearance may have buried her at a construction site. In 2008, cadaver dogs were used on Highway 23 in Ventura County looking for clues on the death of Roger Madison, who was 16 years old. They believed that Mack Ray Edwards buried Roger in an area where freeway work was taking place. Edwards was convicted of murdering Stella Darlene Nolan, 8 years old, of Compton, California, who disappeared on June 20th, 1953. Gary Rochet, or Rochet, depending on what source you see, his last name could be spelled in different ways, who was 16, of Granada Hills, California, who was found on November 26, 1968, after having been shot to death, and Donald Allen Todd, who was 13, of Pacoima, California, who disappeared on May 16, 1969. Edwards confessed to 3 additional murders. Because the bodies were not found, he was not charged. The first 2 were, of course, Donald Lee Baker and Brenda Joe Howe on August 6, 1956, and he also confessed to Roger Dale Madison, who was 15, of Sylmar, California, who disappeared on December 16, 1968. Edwards is believed to have been involved in the disappearances and murders of other children, though they have not been proven. In prison, he claimed to have killed 18 children, though an interview with the LA Times claims the number was 6. There is a 12-year difference between the disappearances of Donald and Brenda in 1956 and the murder of Gary Rochet in 1968. It is very possible that he committed more murders during this time span, as the main caveat against convicting Edwards was finding the bodies in general. In 2007, Brenda's case was reopened as authorities renewed the search for the bodies of Edwards' victims. Authorities believed that he may have buried the children's remains under the highways. A news article from 2011 stated that the body of one of his victims was actually found at a freeway site in Orange County, though it did not state which victim in particular. The link with the source on Wikipedia did not seem to turn up, and the other 2 articles I found did not state the victim's name. I'm not sure who this person would have been, because at the same time too, all of these people that I will end up talking about later on in this video are still listed as missing on NamUs. And with the way that the NamUs website works is that if a person is missing, their profile is of course, well, searchable. It's there on the website. But once somebody is found, they are not on NamUs anymore. So my point is that who was found, and is this somebody that we already know about, or was this somebody else? But back to the main point. In March of that same year, 2007, the LAPD was investigating the possibility of Edwards' involvement in the disappearance of Thomas Eldon Bowman, who was 8 years old, of Redondo Beach. Thomas disappeared in Pasadena, California on March 23, 1957. He was last seen walking with his cousins and other family members on a trail in Arroyo Cinco Canyon in Altadena, California. He had told his relatives that he was running ahead to the car, and when his family got there, he was nowhere to be found. Despite a search, there were no clues. A week after Thomas disappeared, a letter was mailed to his house that stated that he was alive and well and being cared for by an unknown man. Another letter was sent to a newspaper that stated that Thomas was living in Oklahoma. It's unknown whether this was true or not, and did not help in trying to find Thomas. Apparently, Edwards' employer, Cursed Construction, kept an equipment yard less than half a mile from where Tommy Bowman was taken. There has never been the mention of child trafficking in this case, or typically in older cases like this, but I do want to throw the idea out there that someone saying that he was in Oklahoma and alive makes me think, could that have possibly been a possibility? Though at the same time too, with Mack Ray Edwards, as we will see, he almost always ended up killing his victims. Author G. Weston DeWalt was also researching Thomas Bowman's case when he noticed a similarity between a photo of Mack Ray Edwards and a sketch of Thomas's abductor. DeWalt was later shown a letter where Edwards had written to his wife, where he stated that he left out his confession to the police over Thomas Bowman. One thing that I don't understand, or I never saw any sort of source about, is how, on one hand, Tommy Bowman ran to the car and disappeared, and yet here we have someone saying that there is, or was, a sketch of Thomas's abductor, which to me means that obviously somebody saw, more than likely, Mack Ray Edwards kidnap Tommy Bowman. Thomas was also known as Tommy and was even listed in the newspaper articles about his disappearance. He was born on January 6, 1949, and was 8 years old at the time he went missing. He was 4 feet tall and 50 pounds. He had dark blonde hair and brown eyes. He was last seen wearing a t-shirt, blue plaid shirt, brown shoes, and jeans. Another case that Mack Ray Edwards is a suspect of is the disappearance of Bruce Kremen of Granada Hills, and then also Karen Lynn Tompkins of Torrance, California. Bruce Kremen was just a week shy of his 7th birthday when he went missing. He disappeared on July 13th, 1960, and was last seen in Angeles National Forest in LA. He was 4'5", 65 pounds, with brown hair and brown eyes. He was on a hike with a group of 80 other boys from the YMCA's Summer Fun Club and was somehow separated from the rest of the boys. Despite massive searches, no trace of him was found. Bruce was last seen wearing blue jeans and a white shirt that said Summer Fun Club on the front. Thinking of Bruce Kremen's case in particular, I can't help but wonder if Edwards was part of the YMCA, maybe as a chaperone or instructor. There hasn't been any sort of source or detail or questioning about this contention, but once again, I really do wonder, was it possible for Mack Ray Edwards to have been part of these groups for children? Did he act like he was one of the authorities or adults that was trying to help the children out? As one source has even stated, he had horses and took children camping. Karen Lynn Tompkins disappeared on August 18th, 1961, from Torrance, California. She was last seen at about 5 p.m. leaving an arts and crafts class at Halldale Avenue Elementary School. Karen left the school with her craft, which was 2 covered wagons, and was to return to her house 5 blocks away, but she never came home. Karen was born on July 25, 1950, making her 11 years old at the time of her disappearance. She was 4'11", 55 pounds, with blonde hair and blue eyes. She was last seen wearing a white cardigan, long-sleeve sweater, a white sleeveless blouse, blue shorts, blue-white socks, and rubber sandals. She was also wearing a Hanover wristwatch and a pearl chain necklace with a clear plastic pendant that contained a mustard seed. She had freckles across the bridge of her nose and a brown-colored birthmark in the middle of her forehead, half an inch below her hairline. Her teeth were uneven. Karen had an older brother named Michael and a younger sister, Lori. Their mother, Laura, worked at the Broadway store in the Del Amo shopping center. Karen's father, William, was in the Navy. He was stationed on the USS Ticonderoga aircraft carrier in Hong Kong when Karen disappeared. The Navy gave him emergency leave to return home to be with his family. A few days after Karen disappeared, a 40-year-old man was arrested for kidnapping her when the police found bloodstains on his underclothes. He denied having anything to do with her and was eventually released for a lack of evidence. I never saw a source as to what this person's name might have been, nor was there a picture for what this suspect might have looked like. Dorothy Gail Brown disappeared on July 3rd, 1962. She was 11 years old at the time. Called Gail, she was reported missing from Torrance, California. Her bike was found on the sidewalk a block from her home. Police immediately suspected that she'd been kidnapped because of the abduction of Karen Lynn Tompkins, who went missing a year before, in what was almost exactly the same spot. There was a massive search for her that turned up nothing until July 6th of that year. The Torrance Herald reported that the nude body of the girl was discovered by skin divers near Corona del Mar about noon Wednesday. It was floating in a kelp bed about 150 yards offshore. About an hour and a half before the body was discovered, the 12-year-old daughter of Mr. and Mrs. Richard Shanklin from Long Beach found the girl's white dress stuffed in a beer can in the water at Tin Can Beach. The dress was taken home and laundered by Mrs. Shanklin, who says she knew nothing about Gail's disappearance at the time. After reading about it in the newspapers, she turned the dress over to police. Mr. and Mrs. Brown identified it here Friday morning. A pink plastic hairband was discovered later. It was also in a beer can near Tin Can Beach. Police have questioned several known sex offenders in the area. Another article states that the Shanklins' 12-year-old daughter, Susie, discovered the dress and originally wanted to keep it as a play dress. Mrs. Shanklin stated that she told her to throw it away and that it was dirty. The coroner stated that Gail had been in the water for 6 to 8 hours and that she had been molested and drowned. Gail's parents, William and Charlene Brown, were so distraught that they offered to give their daughter's clothes to a needy child. Gail was buried, but not before the pastor prayed for her killer to be caught and punished as he ought to be. In the first 2 years after her murder, the Torrance Police Department interviewed thousands of people who were all known sex offenders of the area. It was stated that they were given lie detector tests and a truth serum, of which all were eliminated as suspects. After the tragedies that occurred, the police worked with local PTAs in the area to set up a Block Mothers community watch program in the area. According to one article, during this time of America, files of missing children were destroyed after what would have been their 18th birthdays. This means that any detective work in this post-era has to be done by scratch most of the time. Roger Dale Madison disappeared on December 16, 1968, from Sylmar, California. He was born on October 13, 1953. At the time of his disappearance, he was 5'8", 145 pounds, 15 years old, with brown hair and hazel eyes. He was last known wearing a dark green sweater, light tan trousers, and black shoes. Roger was known for loving animals and rock music. He played sports, guitar, and was close to his family, which included his parents, on top of his 2 sisters and 2 brothers. Roger was last seen leaving his home in the 14,500 block of Sayre Street in Sylmar. He had an argument with his father about smoking and rode away from his house on his motorcycle. He never returned home, and his family thought that he had run away. Mack Ray Edwards lived just 5 houses down from the street that was Roger's home, and he was a regular visitor to the family. Roger was a classmate of Edwards' adopted son, and the 2 boys were friends with each other. Edwards stated that he had lured Roger into an orange grove and tricked him into being tied up as part of a game. Edwards said he then stabbed Roger to death and buried his body under the 23rd Freeway in Thousand Oaks, California, which was under construction at the time of Roger's death. In 2008, authorities dug a 25-foot deep pit near the freeway, but the search was called off due to safety concerns. They believed that his remains were close to the site, and one of Roger's younger sisters left a bouquet of flowers there. Ramona Irene Price was born on June 24, 1954. She went missing on September 2, 1961 from Goleta, California. She was 7 years old at the time, 4 feet tall, 45 pounds, with brown hair and brown eyes. She had a pixie-style cut at the time of her disappearance. She was last seen wearing a white pullover sweater, brown pants with fine pinstripes, and flip-flops. She had last been seen at 11 a.m. on that fated day. Her family had been in the process of moving, as she told her father that she was going to walk from her home on Oak Avenue to their new house, which was 7 miles away. Her father didn't believe she would actually do it. According to one source, he told her to go do it or to go try it. Half an hour later, Ramona's parents realized that she was gone. Dogs later tracked her scent for almost 2 miles down Modoc Road near the 101 freeway, which was under construction at the time. There were 2 brothers that were known sex offenders and were initially considered suspects. They admitted to seeing Ramona walking along Modoc Road and that they had spoken to her, but they denied harming her. They were cleared of involvement after both of them passed lie detector tests. One witness reported seeing Ramona climb into a faded blue 1953 or 54 Plymouth. The driver was described as having been a white male between the ages of 30 to 40 with dark eyes, dark hair, a receding hairline, and thin features. He wore an open college sports shirt over a white undershirt. The driver was never identified, and Ramona was never found. In 2011, a search at the 101 freeway was conducted to try finding her body, but I am assuming that nothing was found. Though not commonly connected with articles about Edwards, there are a few more children that have been mentioned as potentially having been his victims. The first is Todd Eugene Colette, who went missing on January 23, 1964, from Goleta, California. This is the same town that Ramona Price went missing from not even 10 years later. Todd was only 3 years old when he went missing, having been born on March 30th, 1960. He was white, 3 foot to 3 foot 3 inches tall, and 30 pounds. Todd was last seen wearing a white sports shirt, light beige or brown corduroy pants, and black loafers. At some point in the near past, Todd was run over by a car and had sustained a head injury. This gave him the tendency to fall asleep at random intervals. Todd was last seen playing near his home in the San Marcos subdivision. He was accompanied by his twin brother and a friend of the same age. There was a shopping center under construction at the time, and the boys were not allowed to enter the site, though Todd did anyway, as did the friend. Todd's brother stayed behind. 20 minutes later, the friend of the mother picked up her son and asked where Todd was. The boy said something about a fire and a bulldozer. Demolition fires were burning at the construction site, burning for 4 hours before being extinguished. The authorities searched the ashes for signs of the boy and also the septic system, but nothing was found. Tracker dogs indicated that he might have traveled near the railroad tracks and over the turnpike overpass. Neighbors have reported seeing a strange man in the area around the time of the disappearance. He was fair-skinned with a black beard and green eyes, wore a navy blue blazer with an insignia that said New Zealand. He was reported to have spoken with an accent, though I'm unsure what exactly this accent might have been. The man had been asking directions to new houses in the area, as the neighborhood was full of new construction. The man was so unnerving to one woman that she made her children go indoors. This man was never identified. Todd was one of 5 children. His mother, Mary, died of cancer in May 2003. The next person is a girl named Lynn Bernadette Lou Rae. She was born on October 5th, 1948. At the time of her disappearance, she was 15 years old. On August 17th, 1964, she was last seen in Long Beach, California at 2:21 p.m. She was 5 feet tall, 100 pounds, with brown hair and hazel eyes. There is little known about her case other than that she may have traveled out of the area with an adult male. One of the children that Edwards confessed to and was convicted of killing was Stella Darlene Nolan, who was only 8 years old. Her case doesn't seem to be talked about as much as the others, quite like how the information on Dorothy Gail Brown was initially hard for me to find. In 1953, Stella Nolan was snatched from a refreshment stand in Norwalk, where her mother worked. Within days after Edwards confessed to her murder, the police found her remains near a freeway abutment in Downey. Her find-a-grave profile states that she had blue eyes and blonde hair. She was a 3rd grader at the Colin P. Kelly School in Compton, California. She had a best friend named Barbara Ann, who was also 8. Her father was a truck driver, and her mother operated a hot dog stand. It stated that she died the day before Father's Day, June 20th. That morning, she had said to her mother, "You know what, Mommy? I think I'll give Daddy his card today. You can't tell him what's going to happen, and I think I'll give him his gift, too." The gift was a bottle of her father's favorite hair lotion. The card read, "Dear Father, I hope you have a very happy Father's Day. From Darlene to you." According to one source, a week before her disappearance, Stella's mother had had a conversation with a man that told her how she had a beautiful daughter. He had also patted her head and asked her mother, "Is there any chance of my kidnapping, buying, or stealing her?" Which, those last two parts really make me think once again, is it possible? Is it possible that even back then there was child trafficking in some way? It later turned out that the Nolans had adopted Stella from an unmarried worker, Betty Jean Eccles, who had no means to care for Stella. In a newspaper clip, Betty Jean stated that she hadn't seen Stella since she was 9 months old. There was no formal paperwork for the adoption, and Betty Jean eventually moved out of California, remarried, and lived in Texas. Initially, authorities thought that Betty Jean may have just taken her daughter back when Stella went missing. But this turned out not to be true. Edwards confessed to how he lured Stella from her home and raped her. He then drove her to the Angeles forest and strangled her before throwing her over a bridge. Initially, Edwards believed that Stella was dead, but when he came back the next day, it turned out that she was still alive and 100 yards from where he left her. Stella was sitting up but unable to move or speak. Edwards took out a pocket knife and then stabbed her to death. Stella's mother, Elena, passed away from cancer on January 21st, 1959, at the age of 46 in San Diego County. She was born on August 28th, 1912 in Florida. There is no real information about her despite Stella's depressing case, and no word as to why or how her and her husband never had any biological children of their own. I can only assume perhaps one of them were infertile, or maybe they just got married at an older age. Elena is buried at Fort Rosecrans National Cemetery in San Diego, California. Stella's father, Owen Delmar, was born on August 6, 1907. He passed away at the age of 64 on February 28, 1972. He is also buried at Fort Rosecrans with his wife and daughter. After Elena's death, Owen had remarried and had a son. Owen's son recalled how the FBI one time showed up at his home to tell his father about the fate of Stella. And this is because even though Elena passed away in 1959, she actually did not know what had happened to Stella's remains. Stella's remains would not be found until way over a decade later, much after Elena had died. Gary Rocha, or Gary Rochet, was shot to death in his parents' bedroom in Granada Hills on November 26, 1968. His mother had dropped him off after school at 3:30 p.m. His mother was at work and father was at sea, and his younger sister was visiting a friend. Police initially assumed that he surprised a burglar, but Edwards claimed that he was startled by Gary after breaking into the home and shot him. Initially, Edwards was going to kidnap Gary's younger sister. Edwards then fled the home. There was not much else known about this case. On May 16, 1969, Donald Allen Todd, 13, was abducted from his home. 2 children found his body below a bridge just a mile and a half from his home, shot. The body had been sexually assaulted. Edwards had shot him with a .22 caliber handgun after he offered the boy $5 for a day's work and then tried to molest him. Donald was born on August 8, 1955 in San Bernardino, California. He is buried at Eternal Valley Memorial Park in Newhall, California. Despite there being a find-a-grave profile for him, there does not seem to be an actual picture of him, nor any links to his family members. There is a find-a-grave profile for Brenda Howell, pointing out that she was murdered, and her body was never recovered. It was created in 2016, though it does not have any connections to her family members that have more than likely passed away by now. There is not a Find a Grave profile for Donald Baker. The same is true for Ramona Price, Todd Colette, and Lynn Lou Rae. There is a profile for Karen Lynn Tompkins. It states the standard birth and death info, and that her body was lost or destroyed. There are no links to other family members in this profile. Her parents also have profiles on Find a Grave, and hopefully they will be linked in the future. Karen's mother, Laura, was born on November 8, 1928, in Okfuskee County, Oklahoma. She passed away on May 16, 2008, in Jacksonville, Florida. She is buried in Okfuskee Free Cemetery in Oklahoma. William Tompkins was born on February 15, 1923. He passed away on February 7, 1991, of cancer. He is not buried at the cemetery with his wife. Instead, he was specifically cremated and his ashes spread in the ocean. The profile is simply a reference for his family to honor him, justifiably. Karen's younger sister, Lori, was only 4 months old when her sister disappeared. She stated that she was sheltered and not allowed to do anything, especially when she turned 11, the same age that Karen disappeared. Lori stated that her mother thought that Karen was gone, though her father always hoped that Karen would be found. There is a profile for Dorothy Gail Brown. She was born on March 2, 1951, and passed away on July 3, 1962. A record I found states that she was born on March 12, 1951, and died on July 4, 1962. Her death certificate states that she was born on March 2nd, though it looks like the person who wrote it may have messed up and tried to make the H a 1, which of course makes the date March 12th. Not that it really matters at the end of the day, but I did find that interesting. It stated that Dorothy was born in Fort Worth, Texas. Both of her parents were born in Texas also. She is buried at Roosevelt Memorial Park in Gardena, California. She was buried on July 9, 1962. There are no links to any of her family members in the profile. Her father, William Floyd, was born on August 25, 1923. He had been in the Army during World War II as the now defunct rank of Tech 5. He died on February 27, 2004, at the age of 80. He is buried at the Knights of Honor Cemetery in Blossom, Texas. There is no picture of his grave or family members linked to the profile. It was very hard trying to find any information on either parent, but especially so of Dorothy's mother, Charlene. And it seems that she does not have a Find a Grave profile. I thankfully found some information about her on Family Search, though. Charlene was born as Charlene Gail Foltz on September 4th, 1931, in Paris, Texas. She married William Floyd Brown on December 29, 1950, and the two had their only child, Dorothy Gail Brown, just a few months later in March 1951. Dorothy was their only child. On July 13, 2006, Charlene passed away in Paris, Texas. Mary Oliva Howell, Mack Ray Edwards' wife and widow, does not seem to have a Find a Grave profile. It was very rough and tough trying to find any sort of information on her, from what I assume was not wanting to be associated with a serial killer. I am not sure if she ever remarried after his death. There was a small snippet on Ancestry that talked about her, stating that she was born in Arkansas on November 12, 1929. Mary passed away on June 4th, 2016. And as much as I would actually really like to know what her thought process was and her opinion was, and more than all, her reaction to everything that her husband had done, unfortunately, there is nothing. I think that I feel like there has to have been some sort of signs that Mack Ray Edwards was off, that he was weird, that he wasn't normal. The man was truly a monster, and I feel like, as a person on the outside, how could Mary not have noticed that? How could her parents not have noticed that? I feel like with a person like Mack Ray Edwards targeting children, this wasn't necessarily something that came out of nowhere. I can't help but wonder if, other than us knowing that he targeted children that were close to him, whether in actual proximity to his house or those that he made relations with, such as taking camping and stuff like that, what other information is there that we could have and should know about Mack Ray Edwards? Was he part of the PTA? Was he part of the YMCA? Was he part of the Boy Scouts and things like that? Was he one of the adults in charge of these children groups that led him to stake out his next victims? Unfortunately, there's actually very little to read about Mack Ray Edwards. And even if you go on websites such as Wikipedia, Murderpedia, and other people's blogs, even stuff on Thought Catalog, you really can't find much of anything. Even looking up things on genealogy websites don't seem to help. I wonder if maybe in some way, shape, or form serial killers are hidden from that public information, but I don't know. All I can really and truthfully say is that Mack Ray Edwards was a monster. And in one word to truly describe him, he was disgusting.